So I thought we would start with the test review itself. So let me pull that up. You should be able to see my screen with what the review looks like. We kind of go through what your test will look like tomorrow. So tomorrow, very similar to today's warm-up, you will have, so I think it's between 20 and 24 questions through Mastery Manager. It is multiple choice. There are a few questions that are select all. So you can see, you might have to select multiple answers. You might not have to. It all just depends. It's everything that we have basically from this review sheet. So finding another a reference angle to finding a positive coterminal, a negative coterminal angle, whether it's from radians or degrees, both are on there. Evaluating. So just like the 15 questions that you have today as that opener, there's a portion, probably about 6 or 7 of those that are some type of evaluating. Within it, there are the inverse questions. There are 4 or 5 inverse questions, and then there's a couple of the triangle trig questions of drawing your triangle, whether it's in a particular quadrant like number 19 is, where they give you a particular point and you have to find the particular trig function, or they give you something like number 18 and then you have to draw it and then figure out using Pythagorean theorem and then answering the question. So that's pretty much what the test looks like. You do have to be specific with understanding the difference between if something is on the infinite, it will address that in the question. Otherwise, you should assume it's on the infinite. Otherwise, you will have a domain such that it's one unit circle, so you will not have to add the plus or minus 2 pi. So this would be the plus or minus 2 pi, and questions, this right here would be just that particular unit circle. Is there any specific questions? Oh, also with that, you have to log in between 7:45 and 3. Use your particular code for the period you are in, and you only have 60 minutes to take the assessment. It is completely multiple choice. I think I said that already, but it is completely multiple choice, but you will only have 60 minutes to take the test. It is plenty of time to take it. 15 minutes more than you would if you were taking it in class. So there's no graphing or anything like that that you need to do. So you are fine otherwise. Is there any particular questions that anybody has? No, nobody wants to ask a question.
How do we find reference angle again?
Okay.
I forgot that.
Yeah, reference angle, it goes to the x-axis. So anything between 1 and 15 here, after you figure out what quadrant it is in. So this one's an easy one, number 5 here. So 190, you're going in this direction. Here's 180, so you're over here to give you your angle of 190. Your reference angle then refers to getting back to that x-axis. So if this is at 180, your reference angle then equals 10 degrees. For it. If it's something in terms of pi, so we take like like number 1. So to me, this is 9 pi over 9, and this is 18 pi over 9, right? For this example, because it's out of 9, so that's pi, that's 2 pi, which means this would be, what, 13 and a half pi, halfway between those two. So 14 pi over 9 is somewhere in this quadrant, giving you what is left over here to get back to that x-axis. That's your reference angle there. Well, if this is 14 pi over 9, how much more to get to 18 pi over 9? 4 pi over 9 for your reference angle. Does that make sense? So, yeah, so you'll have to do that. There's like two questions on that, asking for a reference angle. Answer can't be above, shouldn't be above 90, and your answer can't be negative. So you could eliminate those the answers if there's answers there in the multiple choice. Other questions? These were the latest ones that none of us were in class for. It's been on break here. So in this section here, we're looking at drawing your triangle. You want the arc sine of 3/5. So that's another way of saying this is the inverse sine of 3/5. So inverse, you have to figure out where that exists. That's where this cosine came from. So sine exists for the inverse in 1 and 4. So you have to tell where this exists. Well, if it was down here, your sine would end up being negative. So it has to be up in quadrant 1 that I'm going to draw my triangle. Theta, you got to know that your SOHCAHTOA. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So this is the O, this is the opposite is 3, hypotenuse is 5, do Pythagorean theorem. Otherwise, memorize that it's a 3, 4, 5 triangle. So this here gave you to draw that picture and get to the 4. Now you need the tangent of this picture. So tangent is O over H. So from the theta, the opposite is 3. The A is 4. That's your tangent. Okay. Other questions that I think might occur will be something like 16, where it is all values of this. So it doesn't say anything. So this is going to tell you that it is on the infinite, because it doesn't give you like number 17 where it says it wants to go into pi. You need to know that sine is y. So where is negative 3 root 3 over 2? You know that the y values are here and here with your negative root 3 over 2. Plus you have your unit circle. We're not telling you not to be able to have your unit circle out. You can have your unit circle out when you're taking the assessment for it. So your y has to be negative. Going up is positive. Going down is negative. So your negatives have to be here. and here. So then you have to figure out what those values are, what values that you want there. So this gives you the 4 pi. Where did it come to? There you go. 4 pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3. But you need it on the infinite, so those aren't going to answer. You have to be adding or subtracting the 2 pi and both answers. Now, if we asked you for a trig value of tangent or cotangent, these are not across the picture. So you need both, and you need to be adding 2 pi n to both of them. If they were directly across from each other, like a tangent could be, then you could just add the pi n, plus or minus the pi n to it. Okay. All right, so you have to watch that within your answers when it comes time to those type of questions. Other questions? Anybody have anything else that they want to go over? Pull up the chat. Nobody's saying anything in the chat, so that's all right. Maybe some people are still sleeping at this time. Well,
Seems like my class, Mr. Begeiski. I don't know what's going on. Nobody likes to talk.
Yeah, well, there's 19 of us now, but what out of 140?
It's an important test, as you can tell.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Is there something from like a different worksheet or a different concept that you want to go over? It doesn't have to be from this review. If you have a question, you have to like unmute it too, by the way. Could you do, let's see here. Could you do a problem like 5 from the review? Sure, which? This number 5? All right. All right, so you need to figure out where you're located on the circle and knowing what features you are using. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine. This is 1 over x. You know this is x, and you know this is y because it is sine. All right, so at least start there. Again, you're using your unit circle. If you're taking this at home, you know it's in the bottom corner. Okay. So we just did this. So let's start there. This we just did 4 pi over 3 as the squared. So this would end up being your, God, I hate this. This would be your root 3 over 2 answer, because that's from your unit circle, where it was 4 pi over 3 down here. Your negative root 3 over 2 was your y value down here. Okay. We also know that this says it's squared, so that's going to be a squared value that's there. Minus here, cosine of 4 pi over 3, same point. So use that to your advantage. That's the 1/2. And then we need the reciprocal to the secant of negative 4 pi over 3. Well, that means we're going this way. So instead of stopping in quadrant 3, when we go back, we're going to be up in this quadrant instead. That's still the point up here, but now you're just going to watch your values. You're at a -1/2 and a positive √3 over 2. Scratch that. We wanted the x value. So we want this, but we want it the reciprocal to that. So that ends up being a -2. Because there's your x value reciprocal. -2 times 1/2 minus, and then you're squaring this. So these two are being multiplied together. That's -1, because this is being multiplied. This is being subtracted. Square this, obviously becomes positive. This becomes 3 over 4. Final answer, -1 3/4 or -7 over 4. So again, unit circle being out, very helpful with figuring out where they are. Make sure you're going in the correct direction as you move along. Perform the correct operation on it. So this was multiplication. This is subtraction. That's there. Again, answers are multiple choice. Out there, find the correct answer in the long list of multiple choice answers. Since no one's talking or correcting my mistakes, this here is in what quadrant? Here, so it's -1/2. So this becomes +1 because it's negative times negative, which was there. Nobody corrected me because we're not talking. So 7/4 is not the correct answer. You would have selected the wrong one. 1/4 was your answer. Again, you gotta be able to find your mistakes if they're there. So that was there, but again, something like multiplication of negatives can be a pain. There's somebody else adding to go. If he says, "Good luck on the test." Send him a remind if you have any questions that you don't get answered from me. It's a fair test. We are doing it before break because we don't want to have to do it after spring break and you guys have no idea what's going on. At least some of it right now is current and fresh in your minds of being able to do this, and then we could be done with that unit and go to rationals. Because we all know the week after spring break, we're probably not going back to school and it will be e-learning over the computer. All right, so somebody asked, problems where you evaluate the inverse. Can you explain why some answers are negative and some answers are positive? Perfect. So when you're looking at particular quadrants, depending on if it exists. So in the inverse section, we have these hints where cosine and sine exist this way. You have cotangent and tangent, and you have secant and cosecant go this way. So if your angle that you're looking for ends up in quadrant 4, your answer ends up having to be negative because you can't go through quadrant 3. So when you're looking for your answer, and it ends up being in quadrant 4, your answer has to go this way and be the negative value for it. Right? So it's basically like that idea that the negative it's a negative coterminal name for it, but because quadrant 3 can't have an inverse, you have to be going backwards from it. We didn't have enough time to talk about what graphs look like for it while we were in class. So I guess if you look at number 1, you want inverse sine here, right, of this answer. So we're looking for y. Where is this y negative? If I look at my unit circle, the y ends up being negative down here. So that's the half negative root 3 over 2. And then the y is negative over here, where it's negative half, negative root 3 over 2. So it doesn't, sine inverse only exists in quadrants 1 and 4. So this is the answer we want down here, but we can't give our answer as 5 pi over 3 because you can't go this way to get to that line. You have to go backwards with it. So that's where the answer of negative pi over 3 comes in for your answer. Right. So basically, it's only going to happen for a sine function that ends in quadrant 4, a cotangent that ends in quadrant 4, or a cosecant that ends in quadrant 4. Does that answer your question, hopefully? And you have to think, since I made this test, that both this answer and this answer are probably going to be there. Again, testing your ability to understand that this is the correct answer. This is not going to be the correct answer if it's there in the list of multiple choice answers. So don't select this one. Only this one. Good question. I don't know what else besides, yeah, just you got to watch out for these questions here. Let's see, here's who else got a question. Okay. Problem where we evaluate the inverse. Problem 24 on 7.4 practice day 2. Key wrong. Let me check that out. Hold on. Let me open that up. 7.4 practice day 2. So you're talking about this question here. So if we're looking at, you want the sine of 5 pi over 3, that's down here. So we know that sine is y, so that's the negative root 3 over 2. You want the arc sine of it, so you want the inverse sine. So again, we're back in here. For it, I wouldn't even, it asks for your answer in degrees. For it, a better answer would have been negative 60, because you're going back this way for it. Yeah. Versus 300. So negative 60. Remember, the inverse could only exist in one quadrant. So if I were to ask you a question about an inverse and I asked you over the infinite, basically I am tricking you, because it can't exist, because you can't have an inverse over the infinite. It can only be in that first unit circle. I guess the question that someone asked, when do you know when you put two answers and not one? Well, if it's an inverse, your inverses end up being that there's usually one answer, only because one of the quadrants gets eliminated. Because of it, it ends up being in quadrant 3, like here, or it's just in a quadrant that the inverse doesn't exist in. Whereas you're solving for something like number 18 here, when you have two particular answers, due to the fact that one, they're not across from each other. This is asking you over the infinite, so that's why you're asking to add the 2 pi n, the plus or minus of the 2 pi n in there. If this was just over one unit circle, you'd still have two answers of pi over 3 and 2 pi over 3, because in a non-inverse trig function, it exists both. There's two answers where y is root 3 over 2. It's here and here for those two answers. So inverse 1, anything else, usually there's 2. Like I said, if there's a tangent function, the tangent function could give you where it ends up being that it just happens to be right across from each other in a picture, meaning you'd have one answer here and the other answer here. So every pi, or every 180 degrees, it would occur again. So that's why you'd only use one answer, but it wouldn't be plus or minus 2 pi n, it would just plus or minus pi n for it. Go back to this one. This answer here, because you're asking for the inverse function. So you're going back the other way. You're taking this and you're doing this second. You're doing the inverse of that. To be honest, I wouldn't lose sleep over this, due to the fact that we don't ask you that on the test. So you have to know that if it ends up being if you're doing this to the function, you have to be going backwards if you're in quadrant 4. You're doing the inverse sign of that function. Negative 60 is a better answer. Like that, Jacob. Other questions? No? All right, well, if you have any other questions or things like that, I guess I will end the recording and then I will